G'day mate, my name is James and you're here I assume because you want to create a React app, or at least I hope so, because in this video I'm going to be introducing you to a tool called Create React App. It's an open source tool that's maintained by Facebook and it lets you create React apps. No shit, but it's also a really good way of getting started with React. So let's dive in right after we talk about bacon. So this series is going to walk you step by step through the process of creating your very own online service that makes bacon, which is of course a metaphor for making money. And so by the time you're done, you're going to have learned to accept payments with Stripe, to store data with Firebase, to send emails, and you know, all that good stuff. Of course, before taking over the world, you're first going to need a way to take your app source code and turn it into something which the browser understands. So basically you're going to need a build system. And while there's a number of different options out there, if you're just starting out, then Create React App is by far the simplest. So let's try it out. So I've opened up my terminal, but just before we get started, I want to mention that I'm assuming that you've already got Node.js installed, and I'm also assuming that you're already familiar with the command line. So if you need any help with those two, I've got some links for you down below. But otherwise, let's get started. So it's ridiculously simple to get started with Create React App. All you need to do is type in npm init react-app and then whatever you want to call your app. So I'm going to call mine contributants, and you'll see why if you watch the whole series. But you can call it anything and then just hit enter. And then sit back and watch as the computer does all this stuff for you. It's amazing, right? So while we're waiting, you might be wondering what Create React App has to do with npm init. And actually, what npm init does when you pass an argument like react-app is it searches for a package called create-whatever the argument was called. So in this case, it searches for a package called Create React App, and then it installs it and uses it to initialize your package, which is what you can see happening right now. Okay, so now that npm init is completed, all we need to do is change into the directory that it's created. So for me, that's going to be cd contributants, and then start the development server using npm start. So if we do that, what you'll see that is in a second, Create React App will open up a browser for you, like that. And then we just need to wait for Create React App to actually finish the initial build. So once that's done, it'll refresh the browser and you'll see a spinny React thing. So if we just give that a few seconds, there you go. It's all done. And so the first thing it asks us to do is edit source/app.js and save to reload. So to do that, I'm just going to open up an editor. Here we go. And if you open up source/app.js, let's just edit this into hello world as is tradition and save the file. And there you go. You can see that this is refreshed and you can see the new changes. So it's basically everything you need to develop React. Now, later down the track, you might decide that you want some other features, like you might decide that you want server-side rendering, which I'll show you how to add later. But for now, that's basically all you need. So let's take a tour through all these new files you've got. So you've already seen app.js, so let's start our tour here. So this file is pretty simple. It just exports a React component, which you can see here. And I should mention that for this video series, I'm going to assume that you're already familiar with the basics of React, so things like components and elements. And if you need any help with those basics, I've linked my course React Without the Buzzwords below, which will take you through all of that. But assuming that you are familiar with React, then this file should pretty much make sense. It just defines and exports a class component. And it doesn't have to be a class component either. We could change this to a function component. And I'm going to actually do that because that will give us access to all of the new React Hooks APIs, which are really nice. So let's do that and then save the file. And you'll see that the browser refreshes and it all works just as you'd expect. So the app component, this is actually responsible for everything that you see on the screen. But why is it that it's the app component that's responsible for all of this and not some other component? So to find out, we're going to have to take a look at another file called index.js. So index.js is the entry point to your application. It's basically going to be called as soon as your app is downloaded and ready to go. And it's a really simple file. It only really does two things. In fact, this second one, service worker.unregister, this doesn't really do anything at all. So I'm just going to remove it. And I will cover service workers in a future video, but I think it's easier to just get started without them because they're completely optional and they do add extra complexity and things that can go wrong. But with the service worker line gone, that just leaves us 4 imports and a single line of actual code. And it's really simple. We just import React DOM so that we can call the render function. We import React so that we can use JSX. And then we just import the app component that we took a look at in the previous file in app.js and render it. And that's how all of this appears on the screen. So it's really simple. Of course, there is one import statement that I didn't go over, which is this index.css import. And this is a little odd because usually you can't import style sheets with JavaScript, but you can with Create React App. In fact, you can import all sorts of things with Create React App. You might have noticed earlier on in app.js, we're importing an image file, which is where this React logo comes from. And that's not all. You can actually import CSS modules and Sass files, and you can even import TypeScript files. But in this video series, I'm going to mostly stick to JavaScript. In fact, even for styling, we're going to use a tool called Styled Components, which lets you style your app with plain JavaScript. And I'm going to introduce that in the next video. But for now, there's still one more question to answer, which is, how is this index.js script actually called? And why are we rendering to this DOM node called root? So to find out, we're going to need to look at one more file, which is the index.html file. Okay, so I've opened the index.html file, which is in the public directory. And you can see, if you take a look, it's just a plain HTML file. There's no JavaScript, there's no JSX. There's nothing special about it other than the fact that you can interpolate environment variables like this public URL here. And there's a comment here that explains this, and there's details in the Create React App documentation. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can read through that. But apart from that, there is one kind of strange thing about index.html when you think about it, which is that if you take a look through here, there's no script tags. There's no JavaScript, which is really odd for a JavaScript application. And that actually gets even weirder when you think about it more, because index.html does have this root tag, which is referenced by index.js. That's where your app component is rendered to. So given that's the case, you'd kind of expect it to be a script tag, which loads index.js. So to see why there is no script tag, let's take a look at the source which is sent to the server. So if we do a view source on the application, what you'll see is a HTML file, which looks very much like the one in index.html. In fact, it's almost identical. It still has the root tag, but if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that there is a difference, which is that the version that's sent from the server actually has these script tags injected at the end. And the reason for that is that Create React App builds all of your source and all of the dependencies into just a few script tags, which it then injects in, so you don't have to do that. And that's pretty standard for a JavaScript application these days, so I'm not going to go too much into the details of that. But one thing I do want to point out here is the file names of these files here. So we've got static/js/bundle.js, and that's kind of odd because there's no static directory. Like if we have a look in the project here, there's a public directory and a source directory, but there's no static directory. And the reason for that is that Create React App actually does all of this in memory. It compiles everything in memory and then serves it from memory, and that makes the development process a lot smoother. But it's also a problem if you want to deploy your app, because if you want to deploy your app to the internet, you're going to need some files. And so of course, Create React App does give you a way to produce those files. But instead of me just telling you how to do that, let's see if you can't figure it out for yourself. So now that you've learned the basics, it's time to get your hands dirty with an exercise. And in this exercise, your task is going to be to go and create your own app using Create React App, and then to figure out how to bundle it into static files so that you can deploy it. Now, Create React App includes great documentation, so you could definitely figure out how to do this by taking a look at its website. But I'm going to give you a hint, which is that you should be able to figure out how to do this without leaving the terminal at all. So with that in mind, I'm going to give you a few seconds of bacon sound so that you can pause the video, and then once you're done, I'll see you on the other side. Hey, if you actually did that exercise, then congratulations. Getting your hands dirty is the only way you're going to truly learn this stuff, so it puts you on the right track. And even if you didn't do the exercise, you can still go back and give it a try, which I'd really recommend doing. But either way, there's still one big question remaining, and that's the question of why. Why use Create React App at all, as opposed to one of its alternatives? And I think that's a really important question. So if you'd like to see an answer, I've put some details for you on my website called Frontend Armory, which I've linked below. But otherwise, that's it for the first episode of React and Bacon. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you next week.